Good afternoon, everyone. I am Elise Myers of the New York Times. Welcome to our third annual Sunday with the magazine, the first in our new home at the Times Center. Every Sunday, the editors and writers of the New York Times Magazine examine the way we live now. Today, we are delighted to bring you the magazine live in conversations that explore everything from what we eat to what we wear to the focus of this conversation, what we believe. Our guests are three of today's most eminent writers on the subject of religion and its role in politics. In best-selling books and magazine articles, they have explored thought-provoking questions such as what led the U.S. to favor Sunnis over Shiites in Iraq, whether North Korea went awry because of Confucianism, not communism, and why Jews and Muslims diverge in their views of Sharia. We are grateful that they've joined us in the Times Center this afternoon, as well as in a live webcast for those who are unable to be with us. You will hear much more about our guests from our moderator, a respected journalist who is one of the many reasons why these times demand the Times. He joined the magazine in 1998 as a contributing writer and quickly became known for cover stories that people read on Sunday and talk about all week long. A native New Yorker, he has covered everything from city politics and food to sports and diplomacy. In recent years, he has traveled the world from Haiti to Iraq and the Congo to Kosovo to cover some of the most important stories for the magazine. His most recent cover story last month explored the growing interconnection between celebrities and philanthropy. His many fans are looking forward to his next book coming this fall, The Freedom Agenda: Why America Must Spread Democracy, Just Not Like George Bush Did. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, James Traub, and our special guests, Noah Feldman, Christopher Hitchens, and Mark Lilla.
Well, I'm delighted to have everybody here. It's a very large crowd, and I think you realize you can't go wrong with these three gentlemen who are sitting to my left. I'm going to essentially play the hockey referee. I'm going to drop the puck and skate out of the way. And I think also we may not necessarily stick to the religion in American politics subject, so I want all of you guys also to feel free to speak as well about broader subjects like religion in the Middle East. But I want to start off, though, by posing the question why there is so much more religion in American political life, why it is so much more immersed in religious language and religious tests than was true, let's say, 30 or 40 years ago. That is that because we're in the middle of some kind of third great wave of religiosity, and this is simply an inevitable consequence of that? Is that because politicians have figured out how to exploit religious feeling in a way that wasn't true before, or is there yet some other reason? So let me just start by asking you that question, Noah, because you've actually written about that, and then the others, please feel free to go ahead and jump in.
Well, I think it took at least two of the factors that you mentioned. First, there had to actually be a rise in people's feeling for evangelical religion, evangelical Christianity in the United States. And I think that did happen in the later 60s and in the 1970s. But that wasn't enough for it to enter political discourse, I think. What it took for that to happen was for a coordinated group of people to realize that evangelical Christians could be organized into a relatively effective, though not always consistent, political force.
And that means specifically on the right.
Yes, and I think that that begins in earnest with the moral majority, which is a great phrase, moral majority. They took Nixon's phrase silent majority and transformed it cleverly into moral majority, and then really sustained itself through the 1980s, peaking in the 90s with the Christian Coalition. And I think that the idea that you could have an effective political organization to this effect also benefited tremendously from a sort of sense of political backlash to things like the Supreme Court's decision in Roe against Wade to make abortion legal, notwithstanding what states might think about it. So I think it took both. And politics is experimental. You experiment to see if you can get people with a certain set of beliefs to jump on board a movement. And if you can, that's a reason to keep on trying, and it becomes self-sustaining as you learn to raise funds and send out direct mailings and be more effective.
Christopher, is that your sense as well?
I think I would only rephrase what Noah said and put it like this, that it comes from the identification of secularism with liberalism, and particularly with feminism. That's what it's a reaction to, in foreign policy as well as in domestic. And in other matters such as the two that never go away, obviously, are abortion, which allowed also a kind of reverse ecumenicism to take place on the right. The Protestants hadn't particularly cared about abortion until they noticed how much the Catholic right wing cared about it. There was a possibility of a coalition building there. And some Jews too. And they like to make nice with Jews, especially the more anti-Semitic ones of them.
They think Jews are going to be the kind of carrier pigeon of the apocalypse.
As Lenin used to say about social democracy, we should support it as the rope supports the hanging man. So the eschatological extremists, of whom there are quite a lot, the premillennial dispensationalists, the people who like these End of Times novels and the Left Behind series, are extremely pro-Zionist and indeed very much against even the smallest concession on territory, because they need it for the Armageddon, which will, of course, I think it's only 1 in 10 Jews are going to be spared that. But
presumably they don't know which ones
story,
they are.
So that's when that's about the size of it, I think. And then there's the other one, of course, is the attempt to teach creationism in the schools, a defeat they won't admit from all the way back in the 20s.
But is the bad thing the rise in religiosity itself, or is it the rise, for example, in eschatological thinking, the way in which this whole question of end times and transcendental things is brought into political life? Mark, I know you wrote about this in your book, The Stillborn God.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the story that Noah and Christopher have been telling can be filled out a bit by looking at the simultaneous Great Awakening coming out of the 60s, self-discovery on the one hand, and the other is the collapse of all kinds of religious institutions. That at the same time there was a great de-churching of America, so that people left mainline Protestant churches, left the Catholic Church, found themselves in new sorts of churches, intellectual figures that were religious, that commanded some authority in the 1950s and early 1960s. You can name the usual names down through Reinhold Niebuhr and so on. There's no one like that out there right now. So there's been a tremendous dumbing down and atomization of the
why is it dumbing
religious
down?
Religious
why is that the kind of deinstitutionalization of religious feeling, this increasing individualization of it, why should that inevitably mean lower quality discourse dumbing down?
Because that's democracy. That's why. That's what happens. It has to do with the decline of the educational institutions that produced ministers and priests and rabbis in the past in certain streams of Judaism, on the one hand. And it also has to do with the spirit out of the 60s, I think, coming that everyone should be able to pretty much express himself. And it's a kind of anti-hierarchical sense, intellectual sense, that infected theological discourse as well.
But wait,
when that happened, and I'll just mention one book worth looking at. One of the best books on this was written by an evangelical named Mark Knoll, which was called I think it's called The Closing of the Evangelical Mind, where he complains about this from within and sees the same things that all of us see.
Yeah, Noah?
Yeah, I just wanted to just say that alongside that, though, it's also true that the institutions that produce evangelical leadership, which Knoll is criticizing, nevertheless were able to create relatively, at least university-educated leadership for the evangelical movement in a way that hadn't necessarily existed, let's say, among early Christian fundamentalists, let's say, at the time of the Scopes Monkey trial that Christopher was mentioning. So in fact, relative to where at least fundamentalism, American fundamentalist Christianity, was in the early part of the 20th century, there's actually a substantial improvement. The success of colleges that were small-town Bible colleges and that become Christian universities is a kind of counter-trend. Now, It doesn't mean it's not a dumbing down of the kind that Mark is talking about at the very highest level. You don't have the sort of towering theological figures, let's say, in some general way, although Stanley Hauerwas might disagree with that.
Yeah,
so I'll give another instance that might actually help us to bring it up to the present day too. The identification of liberalism with secularism and so on is contradicted in part and also materialized in part by the civil rights movement, which is liberalism's greatest claim to moral authority. And there's a sort of penis envy, you could almost say, among the white Presbyterian Southern type right wing that they can do it. and get praised for it in the newspapers, and we're accused of bringing religion into politics. And in fact, Falwell got his start